Hi, and welcome to unit number 3. This week, we're going to set out to answer a question that is often framed in the following way. Yeah, we know about negotiation, but couldn't there be a better way to do things? And in this unit, we're going to try and figure out what people mean by a better way and what such a better way might indeed be. But even the question itself indicates that many people find negotiation, at least in the distributive or positional or bargaining sense of the term, they find it a very, very stressful, harrowing, burdensome activity, and are looking for ways out of it. And indeed, that shouldn't come as any surprise, given that when we think about the things that we associate with these kind of settings, so the scenes aren't exactly pleasant in many of our minds. We picture people making demands of one another, issuing ultimatums, walking out the door, raising their voices. And while there are a great many other tactics and they are not all unpleasant, that's kind of the pictures that we have in our minds, and maybe that's just TV's fault, or maybe because in reality it sometimes looks that way. If distributive negotiation often looks that way, then there will be cases in which distributive negotiation might not be the way to go. There are many, many situations in which you might be able to achieve advantage over your counterpart by means of such an approach to negotiation, but the question is it worth it to you? You might be involved in a long-term relationship with that person, and sure, you can beat them this time. You can win. You can win this zero-sum game. But is that in your best interest in the long run? You might be a wonderful, excellent, talented, competitive bargainer, but you might also find that that might not be the best way to go. Let's say if you're trying to decide with friends what movie you want to see tonight, or with your spouse about what restaurant you want to go to tonight. So there might be certain situations in which you'll decide that is not a suitable approach. There would be too much cost to the relationship, so I might want to choose something else. I'll add on that it's not just an issue of cost to the relationship that might make you want to look for something else. It's also that that form of distributive negotiation tends to lead you to zoom in and to focus only on the number you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to bargain down the price of a car, you come in and you have a number in mind and you're trying to lower the number. And very often when we focus on one issue and one issue alone, and we try to force the other's hand into giving us that number, we might easily not see other things surrounding the negotiation that might be very, very beneficial to us. We just don't see them because we are powering on by, focused on our one point. So, what approach might offer an alternative to this way of doing business? In this unit, we're going to be focusing on what's called interest-based negotiation, or integrative negotiation. We'll explain the differences between these two in just a minute. Interest-based negotiation is a system of negotiation that was first explained in 1982 by Roger Fisher and William Ury in their book, Getting to Yes. And what this model of negotiation suggests is that instead of parties trying to twist each other's arms and bring each other down to their knees, parties would be better off served by focusing on their own interests. And once you focused on your own interests, in other words, what are the needs and the underlying motivations that have really brought you to this table? What do you really need to get in order to walk away from here satisfied? If you focus on those needs, you might often discover several things. The first is that those needs are not in opposition to your counterpart's needs. And two, that the way to satisfying your own needs might be through helping the other party satisfy their needs. If parties are able to work together in this way, they can both walk out of a negotiation with their underlying motivations satisfied without either having threatened the relationship by trying to bring each other down, or without either of them having to compromise on things that are very, very important to them, which parties often do if they resort to bargaining, which in essence seeks compromise. Right? So if you're interested in satisfying an interest completely, bargaining, which entails compromise, is not going to help you. Going back to an example we used in the previous unit, if you really, if you're negotiating for the ownership of a book, and what really interests you is reading the book and knowing what the book is about, including its climactic outcome, then bargaining over the book and having the other party receive the last 40% of the book is not going to satisfy your interest of knowing what happened in the end. So that's not a method of negotiation that is likely to give you the outcome that satisfies your interest of enjoying the book, of knowing the outcome, of following along with the characters, and so on. As we discuss interest-based negotiation, and we will be laying this model out and learning its main principles throughout this unit, we'll also be discussing something similar, which is called integrative negotiation. And I just want to give a few words to why we're using these two terms and sharing them as something that is both similar and yet separate. So the first thing to say is that in the literature, some of which you'll be introduced to, a lot of these terms are used interchangeably. So you have interest-based negotiation and integrative negotiation and win-win negotiation. You might find principled negotiation and cooperative negotiation. And while some of these indicate slightly, different things, they're kind of lumped together into modes of negotiation in which parties work together in order to create joint gain, and they engage in cooperation in order for everyone to leave satisfied. However, there are differences between all of these different modes of negotiation. And just to zoom in on interest-based and integrative, interest-based negotiation focuses on having each party's underlying interests satisfied to the extent possible. Integrative negotiation focuses on taking both parties' capabilities and resources and figuring out how to put those two together in order to create the most value possible. If this still sounds the same, I don't blame you. But here's just as a small example of what one of the differences might be. For example, interest-based negotiation tends to zoom in on shared interests. When both parties have a shared interest in something, in terms of interest-based negotiation, that's a gold mine to exploit. You can point at it and say, look, we're not really in opposition here, we both want X to happen. Integrative negotiation, on the other hand, rejoices in differences. When we have cases where parties assign different values to different things, that one prefers X and the other prefers Y, that is a moment of opportunity from the point of view of integrative negotiation, because that means that party A can get X and think that they got a very valuable thing, and party Y can get and party B can get Y and think that they got a very valuable thing. And the transaction will have both parties feeling as if they received the most value possible out of this interaction. And once again, if that still sounds like it's all the same stuff, that's fine. Leave it at that. We'll be meeting both of these terms inside, and maybe the differences will be clarified as we go along. While this approach to negotiation may sound very appealing to someone, I mean, what's not too appealing? Wouldn't it be great to be able to work with people and have everything nice and friendly, even as we go about getting what we want? Make no mistake, working with people in negotiation can be just as hard and sometimes harder than working against them in the competitive sense of the term. Picture yourself walking into a room and trying to cooperate with someone who doesn't have that in mind and perhaps never even considered it. That sounds like a rough situation. Even beyond the other's behavior, another issue that makes integrative or interest-based negotiation a very great challenge to master are the voices in our own minds. And these are the voices that warn us all the time, wait, if you try to cooperate, they may not cooperate with you. They might take information you're sharing and use it against you. They might pretend to be working with you, but then stab you in the back. And we have this internal debate going on, and the more we cooperate, the more we're putting ourselves out on a limb. So the voices often get stronger. This internal debate is just as important as the other's behavior in making any cooperative form of negotiation a great challenge to carry out. The rewards are great when you can pull it off. This week, we'll do our best at figuring out how to make that happen. I'll see you inside.